Hey, CrossFit Vernon. We're back with some Thursday Thoughts. Last week we started our discussion on periodization. So just a quick review. What is periodization? Periodization is simply your plan. It can become a very complicated topic, but really in its most basic form, it's just forming a plan that's going to help guide you through a training duration, let's call it, right? Like it can be a year, it can be 6 months, 8 months, 12 weeks, whatever. It's just the plan that you're going to follow on the way there. Um, the old adage, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I think Mike Tyson said that. That's kind of the way that periodization works. I have this plan. Oh, you were supposed to max out today. Oh, but I'm sick. So we have a plan, but it's not a rigid plan. I broke down the macro cycle, mesocycle, and microcycle. So the macro cycle is our long-term plan. It can be, it's the entire duration of the time that you, like either your entire yearly circle that will come back around to World Championships or the CrossFit Games, your quadrennial cycle that comes all the way back around until the Olympics, or somebody might come to you and say, hey, I want to run this 5K and I have 12 weeks to get ready. That would be your macro cycle, is the 12-week plan that you're going to take up to that event that they want to do. So it's your long-term plan. It includes important dates and competition. That's really the most important part of your macro cycle. And then also what fills in the macro cycle is the mesocycle, which are our focus training blocks, and they're of an undetermined length. So let's say I am a CrossFit athlete and I do want to run a 5K and I have a specific goal and I've got 12 weeks to train for it, then I would have a 12-week macro cycle dedicated towards running, and there might be some blocks within that, some kind of like sub macro cycles that I'll go through, but that's kind of my plan throughout the season as I start blocking these things out. So they're focused training blocks of an undetermined length, and they're made up by microcycles. And microcycles are typically week-long blocks that follow a logical progression of, like either driving up intensity or driving up volume or driving up basically intensity and volume, like we measure intensity, speed, load, fatigue, and complexity. So you're either increasing volume or you're increasing intensity, or you're managing the two of them concurrently. And then we also introduced KPIs, key performance indicators, and these are what helps guide our decision-making process. We can base these on the 10 general physical skills. We can base them just on kind of like benchmarks within CrossFit, or we can look into the sport that we might be playing, if that's what we're doing, and base them off of that. Oh, this person can do this score on this event, and so I also need to be able to do that if I want to be competitive in this arena. So we've got our macro cycle, which is year-long or long-term. It's got important dates in it. Our mesocycle, which is going to be our focus training blocks, broken down into like a sub-mesocycle, 4 weeks here, 6 weeks there, yada, 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 and then a microcycle, which is typically a week long. And what I want to talk about this week is just to kind of like keep things a little bit more succinct, a little bit more relatable, and maybe a little more interesting to you guys, is we're going to shift gears and start talking exclusively about CrossFit and how we do things at CrossFit Vernon, because I think that's going to be of the most value to the people that are watching these videos. So the first question is, what do we consider for planning when I'm designing the workouts for CrossFit Vernon? And the first one is the macro cycle. So when I look at our macro cycle, I'm thinking about seasons, and that's kind of like competitive seasons, as well as seasons that people, like spring, fall, winter. So the most important time of year is the open, and from a training perspective, because that's when people are kind of like wanting, they're more excited about competing in CrossFit. They're going to be tested on CrossFit skills. We want to give them the opportunity to demonstrate what they've got. So coming into the open, we have a much more CrossFit focused program. But then in summer and winter and in our shoulder seasons, things change. So, like as a gym that supports people where CrossFit is not their primary goal, alongside people where CrossFit is their primary goal, there's a bit of a balance here. In the summertime, people are often out, they're enjoying the outdoors, they're riding their bikes, maybe they're staying up a little bit later, they might be off their diet slightly, consuming more alcohol. We know that these things are happening. They might not be happening with everybody, but we know that they're happening more frequently with more people. And for that reason, we have the chance to just kind of pull things back ever so slightly. On the shoulder seasons, when things are changing, people are experiencing lots of change. So we want to be ready for those changes, right? Like we're going from winter to spring, from spring to summer. As we hit those transitional phases, we know that people are going to be under a little bit more stress. So we kind of draw things back. In the winter time, a lot of people are like indoors. So this is a great opportunity for us to train harder. We're not doing as much stuff outside. We're probably taking a little bit better care of ourselves. We're sleeping more. We have more energy to dedicate to our diet, and it's not as social. There's not as much social pressure to engage in drinking or staying up late or doing those types of things. So we know that we'll have a better ability to recover from stress. Individually, if you come in for a goal review session, you might, in the summertime, it might be, I'm mountain biking and running a lot, so I want to go down to 2 or 3 days per week. In the summer, I don't do that, unlimited. Vice versa, in the wintertime, I'm skiing and snowboarding a lot, I'm traveling a bit, I want to go down to 2 times per week. In the summertime, I want to get in shape, I want to look at my shirt off, we're going back up to unlimited. So there's the general macrocycle plan, and then there's the individual macrocycle plan. Within this, we have different opportunities and times to focus on strength, focus on conditioning, and focus on specific skills. And we can only do so many things at once. We can't all get stronger at the same time, all get fitter at the same time, and all work on our skills at the same time. There's only 5 classes in a week, and we need to leverage progressive overload. So in the late fall, or late summer, early fall is when we start to develop strength and skill focus, and then we transition into conditioning and volume accumulation as we get closer and closer to the open, and we're really focusing on that opportunity to get your first muscle up or your first bar muscle up. After the open, a lot of people get into a spring summer competitive season, so they're doing local competitions and they need to stay in shape. So we maintain our focus on CrossFit. We've kind of built up this kind of progression towards CrossFit the sport, and we keep a lot of CrossFit in the program, but we let all of the other high stress stuff drop off. So we're not doing as much strength volume, we're not doing as much skill practice, we're not doing as much specific heavy conditioning. We're doing a lot more CrossFit so people can maintain their skills as a CrossFit athlete and make it through that competitive season before fall again, where we would kind of dial things back. Now in the summertime, I said, where we pull things back, knowing that there's going to be more stress in people's lives or less recovery in their lives, much less heavy weight training, because we know that has a big recovery piece to it, fewer big long workouts that are going to be high in contraction. So this is where we do things like the strength circuit, and the strength circuits are hard. They usually floor a lot of people, but not everybody is always left feeling really sore and banged up from them. So we do things like circuits to get our strength work in, and we do a bit fewer of the really, really hard things. So that's how we manage the seasons at CrossFit. And then the mesocycle within those seasons is what are we focusing on? Strength, conditioning, skill. I just kind of laid that out for you guys. Now our microcycle, most microcycles, they rotate on a 5-day or a 7-day week. So every Monday is the exact same workout. We snatch on Mondays, and then we do some intervals and we do some gymnastic skills. Every Monday. I don't like it. I think it's boring. So what I do is I have a 9-day rotation. I create a list of all the things that I want to work on for that given season, and then I stretch it out over a couple different mesocycles, and it runs through progression. Day 1 will be squatting strength, and then day 2 will be this all the way down to 9. So we've got our 9 days here, 9 days, and they're overlaid on a 5-day week. So we get this staggering. Monday of week 1 becomes, or day 1 of week 1 becomes, starts on Monday and it moves all the way to Friday of the next week. So you're never getting the same repeat all the way through. It's constantly changing. That helps support people who have very strict schedules. So some people are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, no matter what. If they can't make it on a Monday, then they don't come. They just come Wednesday, Friday. Oh, and it's never Tuesday, Thursday. Maybe they've got other things, or maybe they just like the routine. But if we always only had muscle ups on Tuesdays or Olympic weightlifting on Thursdays, those people would never get the opportunity to meet that that workout. So we got to have it constantly changing, and that's part of the CrossFit prescription is constantly varied functional movements. That's how we handle our constantly varied part. And then within that microcycle, we're looking to organize things to improve our KPIs, and then manage movement patterns and workout stress. And the movement patterns and workout stress, or the workout stress, is volume and intensity. So let's kind of jump ahead here. We'll talk about KPIs. Thinking about what are the key performance indicators for a CrossFit athlete. Well, you've got your gymnastics movements, like kipping pull-ups and toes to bar, and then getting a little bit more challenging handstand push-ups, muscle-ups, handstand walk, bar pullovers. If you watch the CrossFit Games, you see press to handstands now, walking up and down a ramp, double under crossovers, things like that. These are high skill movements. And then we've got our weightlifting movements. In CrossFit, it's typically snatch, clean and jerk are the big ones, back squat, deadlift, push press, push jerk. Those are the things that are being tested the most. And then we've got our skills, which is technical proficiency. So I may be able to do 5 bar muscle ups, which is very good, but am I strong enough and fit enough to do more? I'm just not doing more because I'm not as technical as I could be. So I've actually got the gymnastic skill, but my technical proficiency is what's holding me back. And then the last KPI for a CrossFit athlete are our tactical skills. And that's things like pacing, where do I rest, how do I execute on this workout. So we've got a few different KPIs for CrossFit athletes. We're trying to look at, okay, what do we think is going to make people most successful at this time of the year, given that we've got a big group of people, and not all of them are heavily invested in CrossFit. Not all of them are heavily invested outside of CrossFit. So we try and balance it all as best as we can, looking at the KPIs, strength. We can just use the 10 general physical skills as our KPIs. Cardiorespiratory, endurance, stamina. If you watch my previous videos, all the way down the list. And then the last thing that we're managing within our microcycle and our mesocycle is the movement patterns and workout stress. So the movement patterns that we're looking at are squatting, a knee dominant exercise where our hips are moving down and up. Bending or lunging is next, so it's still a knee dominant exercise, but it happens on one leg, so there's a rotary stability component. Bending, which is anytime we bend forwards, up and down. So a bend would be a burpee is a bend, a toe to bar is a bend, an ab-mat sit-up is a bend, a deadlift is a bend. I think about it anytime there's a bending force. So if I'm holding a barbell, it's weighing down, it's pulling me this way. If I'm doing an ab-mat sit-up and I curl up, it's bending my spine. Now something like a kettlebell swing, it looks a lot like a bend, but we would classify that as a hinge because there's not as much bending force. When a kettlebell swing is done, the kettlebell typically loads this way compressively, so we have compressive force, less bending force. The kettlebell is weighing this way as we come down and up and down and up. So any movement where we're bending our spine, hinging is a hip dominant exercise. It could be like a hip thrust as a hinge, or an RDL is more of a bend / hinge because the barbell's still putting a bending force in our spine. But a kettlebell swing, a pull through, where we have the band between our legs and we stand up. Those are all hinge movements where we're not loading the spine as much, but we are very aggressively loading the hips in a backwards and forwards movement. Vertical press, vertical pull, pretty self-explanatory. Pressing my arms overhead or pulling my arms from overhead. Those are our barbell presses, our push presses, our push jerks, our handstand push-ups, our kipping pull-ups, our ring muscle-ups, our bar muscle-ups. All of those are vertical pulls and vertical presses. Horizontal press and horizontal pull, very similar. We've got our bench presses, our push-ups, our dips, and our bent over rows, our single arm dumbbell rows. Those are horizontal press and pull. We've got jumping, double unders, box jumps. If we're doing any hops or anything like that, that would be in there as well. Running and rotating, upper body rotation and lower body rotation. Those are really important components to keep in your program, making sure that we're turning in direction, changing direction. That's part of that agility part of the 10 general physical skills. So those are the movement patterns we're always trying to manage. We want to make sure that we're doing a broad array of them, constantly varied, but not random. So we're always including as many different movement patterns as we can, and then also thinking mindfully about not overloading them. We don't want to be squatting 5 days in a week. Heavy back squats on Monday, whole bunch of lunges on Tuesday, whole bunch of wall balls on Thursday, some more heavy squats on Friday, and then on Saturday we do a bunch of thrusters. It's just it can be too much for the legs. So we're keeping a close eye on making sure that we're not overloading things. And then volume and intensity. Volume is the number of contractions, and intensity is the percent of 1RM or the speed that we're doing those contractions at. So, what I want to try and have is some intense days and some bigger days and then some recovery days. So we're not always, it's not like, okay, back squat, 10 sets of your 1RM, and then the very next day it's 5,000 wall balls, and then after that it's 4 by 1,000 meter row as fast as you possibly can. That's all at maximal intensity. We want to try and vary the intensity, but also vary the volume. We're not doing 20-minute AMRAPs every day of the week. We've got a couple 5-minute AMRAPs in there and some 10-minute AMRAPs and some 4 rounds for time, trying to get some different mixed up time domains, as well as different numbers of contractions. I mean, you could have foreseeably a 5-minute AMRAP that has a couple hundred contractions paired against a 20-minute AMRAP that only also has a couple hundred contractions, and that's how we measure volume. So this is the kind of like the framework of what we do at CrossFit Vernon. We think about the seasons we're in, we think about the goals of the people who are in our community, and we try and block out different periods of the year so that we're not always doing the exact same thing. And then we focus on the KPIs for that specific season. Maybe it's getting stronger, maybe it's improving our conditioning, maybe it's working on our mobility, and we do that in specific ways too. And then the microcycle, the 9-day rotation, gets adjusted, and it repeats over and over and over and over again until we get to the end of that mesocycle, the end of that season, and then it gets adjusted to so that we can focus on our new KPIs. And then we've got all of the things that we're managing. Next week, we're going to talk about how to manage that. And that is done through this method called vertical integration. So I'll leave it there. If you guys are curious and you want to do a little bit of research, check out vertical integration. But that's our video for the week, talking about how we create and manage the program at CrossFit Vernon.